Well, welcome back to our geography class. I trust that you'll be encouraged as we're going to dive back in today. Just kind of give a little preview of what we're going to do. We're going through the regions of Israel, and we've gone through the different sections, and now we're going to run the Transjordan. We're going to look at what's the Transjordan. Lots of things. Most people don't realize Christ had a lot of ministry in what's called the Decapolis, which is across the Jordan. So we're going to look at that. I'm just going to show you a bunch of pictures. Remember, my goal is to kind of reformat your hard drive. What you think of when you think of the scriptures, when you read your Bible, that it kind of comes alive to you. And then we're going to go down and we're going to continue looking like where were the children of Israel right before they entered the Promised Land. We're going to look at Edom. Maybe you heard of Edom, Gilead. We'll even look at some pictures from Petra. No, Indiana Jones didn't invent Petra. It was long before he ever existed. And we're going to look at that. And then we're going to go down to where are the children of Israel, the wandering. What did it look like? What kind of areas were they wandering through in the 40 years of wilderness wandering, if we get that far. And so that's what we're going to look at. So we're looking at Transjordan Plateau. Just a couple, before we do that, highlights. I've announced the Israel trip next Sunday, actually, and those of you that have signed up for it, you know the next Sunday after our service at 12:15 or so, we're going to have a meeting for the Israel trip. Now, even if you didn't sign up for it, and you say, hey, I'm interested, you can go ahead and come. There's handouts. I have some handouts related to the Israel trip, or you can get them out at the table outside. Obviously there's major things going on in Israel right now. There are no tours happening in Israel right now. Haven't since October 7th. And so, but we're not planning to go till 2026. And so Lord willing, God will bring peace in that situation, not just so we can go, but for the peace of his people and also all the other people that this is touching. I encourage you to continue to pray for Oleg Karatki, our missionary who serves there. He lives in Ashkelon, which is less than 10 miles from Gaza. And so 75% of I think I mentioned 75% of the missiles and rockets that they're launching are landing in Ashkelon. And so, but he is just seeing it as a wonderful opportunity for the gospel. So he is taking the gospel. They're ministering. We sent some money. We sent like $5,000 from our church to him, just so he could help with his church and provide resources to people that are in need there. They're also just helping relocate people to safer areas. But he's taking the gospel both sides. He's taking gospel to Jewish people. He's taking gospel to Muslims. He always has. And there's just great open doors, particularly right now. He said there's just a tremendous fear and just unsettled. Everything is unsettled. Can you imagine? Everything is unsettled in the community. Things are not happening. Kids aren't going to school. I mean, it's just everything is unsettled. And so I encourage you to pray for Oleg and Svetlana, it's their names, as they take the gospel there. He's originally from Ukraine. He came to Christ in the Ukraine. KGB, at one time I remember the story, they threatened him with a machine gun and said, you got to tell us right now, all the Christians. He wouldn't do that. God saved him. God protected him, but he went to Kazakhstan, where I met him, where we did a Bible school there, but then he's been in Israel for the last probably 15 years, where he's taking the gospel, because he's Jewish. That's what his ethnic background is. He's taking the gospel to the Jews there, and also the Muslims. So when you think about it, pray for Oleg and Svetlana. Okay. Also, this is just a little update for those of you that parents that have kids. I'm going to try to not go too long. I'm going to try to end like 10:05 at the latest, because it's actually really tight for our children's workers, and so you guys can just walk in. So when I end, if you have young kids, you can go up and get your kids as soon as possible. Even if you have babies, don't just leave them there all the time. From 9 o'clock till noon. No, you need to go up there and just kind of spell the workers. If you can do that would be really great. Right after class, you can come down to fellowship afterwards, but then take your kids back up to their child care afterwards if they're young kids. If you can do that. I might forget that. And there's a certain lady that is helping in the nursery that lets me know and reminds me of things. Her name's Martha. So just an encouragement to you. They love it. They love your kids. It's a great blessing, but just, it'll be a blessing to them. Well, let me open our time in word of prayer, and we'll get started. Okay? Father, we bow before you, and you are so good to us in so many ways, most of all by sending your Son to die on the cross for our sins. God, as your people are gathered here, we're gathered here because you have saved us, and you have drawn us to yourself. And each person here, there's so many things in our lives that we are trusting you for. As we talk about the land of Israel, we would pray for Oleg and Svetlana. We ask that you would graciously work in and through them for your glory, that you would use them to minister, to reach out with the gospel to Jewish people and Muslim people who don't know you. And then as Oleg, as he teaches overseas Bible schools and seminaries, trains leaders for the church, we ask that you use him very effectively. And then as we look at these things today, God, I pray that these would not just be words on a page in a sense, but as you're kind of giving us the picture of the backstory, the land that all these things happen in, so that we can minister, we can understand your Bible more effectively, so we can apply it more clearly. We trust you for that. In your name, amen. Okay, well, I don't know what page I'm in your notes. I'm just showing you a lot of pictures. It's the page that says Transjordan Plateau. Okay, wait, there's just a few things on there. I don't know what page that is. Anyone know what page that is? What? 28. Okay, 28. And remember what I'm doing is probably the last month, the month or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, I've just been going through all the different regions of Israel, okay, trying to help you kind of reformat your hard drive, because we tend to, when we think of the land of Israel, we think of like a Bible story book or something, when it's many times what actually looked like was quite a bit different than that, because it'll really help you if you can understand, what kind of land were the children of Israel walking through? Okay, it was rough. It was very difficult in that. Or where did Jacob wrestle with the angel? Okay, right by the Jabbok River. What did that look like? Why in the world did two of the tribes say, we want to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River? That doesn't make sense. That's solid desert. Actually not. So I'm going to help you see, as you understand some of these things. And we've gone through all the different regions of Israel, okay? So we've gone through the major areas. Let's just review some big picture things. We've got this big body of water on the area in the west, Mediterranean Sea. And then we have the land of Israel right here. Up in the north, we have the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, or the Jordan Rift, as it's called. And then we have the Dead Sea. In Jerusalem, you can just go right over to the left about a third of the way from the top of the Dead Sea, and you have the city of Jerusalem. Okay, and so there's there's actually 6 main areas of regions of Israel, and I'm going from west to east. Okay, we're going to look at a few things north to south, like we'll talk about, Galilee, Samaria, Judea, those regions, and that's the next thing we're going to look at, the regions of the Old Testament, regions of the New Testament. But I'm looking geographically, what are the 6 main regions of Israel, west to east? Okay, we saw first of all the coastal plain, which is a broad plain, maybe about 10 miles wide, very flat. Comes obviously right from the coast of the Mediterranean, and it's there's a major highway that goes right through there, because it was very easy to travel through, and it's called the coastal plain. And the coastal plain really stops Mount Carmel. See that little thumb there? Israel, the coastal plain really kind of stops there. You got a big hill, some hills there, Mount Carmel. You got a little bit of a plain up here in the north. But then we have what's called the lowlands. And remember, there's another name I gave you for the lowlands. The Shephelah, okay, which is, you just spoke a Hebrew word, it means low, okay, it literally means lowlands. And so the Shephelah was the next region. There's a lot of Bible stories in the Shephelah, in the lowlands. Why? Because this was a buffer zone. Because on the coast you have the Philistines, up in the Judean highlands you have the Israelites, and then in between you have this buffer zone called the Shephelah. It's a little bit hilly. It's not real mountain. It's a little bit hilly. Lots of fighting. David and Goliath. I mean, lots of major Bible stories happen in the Shephelah, in the lowlands. There's 4 major valleys. We talked about those valleys that go through this area. So the Shephelah, or the lowlands. Then we get up into the hill country, sometimes commonly called the Judean hill country. And this is where the Israelites, the center of their country. This is where, obviously, Jerusalem is in the hill country. This is where Bethlehem, Jerusalem, all of Samuel's ministry. I mean, it's going to happen in the hill country. And we looked at that in great detail. And that we went all the way up to even into the north. There's some hills up here in the north. And then from the hill country, you go down to what's called the Jordan Rift. And it's the lowest point on earth. I think the Dead Sea, 1,400 feet, the top of it, and it's about 1,400 feet deep. So it's the lowest place on planet Earth. Even the Sea of Galilee is below sea level. And so that's the Jordan Rift, and you have the Jordan River going. We looked at that. We started last time we were together. We started way up in Mount Hermon, which was way up here, probably at the foot of that. That's where the Transfiguration happened. And then we went all the way down through the Hula Valley, not Hula, that's not Hawaii, Hula, H-U-L-E-H, Hula Valley, just north of the Sea of Galilee. Then we have the Sea of Galilee, which obviously tons of Bible stories happen there, New Testament Bible stories where the Christ ministry is really centered around on the Sea of Galilee. And then we went down through the Jordan River, the Jordan Rift, down to the Dead Sea, and then, I think we stopped pretty much there. So today, we're going to transfer over, and we're going to look at the Transjordan Plateau. Here's another map of that, just the similar areas. Here's the green area, kind of the funny colored green is the coastal plain, then the yellow is the Shephelah, or the lowlands, and the Judean highlands you see here in the pink, or the kind of pink color. And then over here we're going to see the Jordan Rift, and then we're going to see the Transjordan Plateau after. This is just another picture of it, just kind of trying to give you a format on this. Here's the coastal plain. Then we have the Shephelah, which is the hills. We have the four valleys that are going through there. The Ajalon River is going through here. The Sorek, the Elah, which is where David and Goliath, and then the Lachish Valley going up through here. And then there's the Judean Hill Country, Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. And then today, we're going to start all up in here. We're going to talk about the Jordan Plateau. We're going to go further south on the Jordan Plateau. You can see the Golan Heights. You've heard of Golan Heights, big in the news, obviously, which is up there north of the Sea of, northeast of the Sea of Galilee. Okay? That makes sense? Any questions where we are? Well, we're going to look at the Transjordan Plateau, okay? Transjordan Plateau. This is that plateau. Here's the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. We're going to look at this plateau right in here. I'm going to start in the north, okay? I'm going to start up in the north, and then I'm going to go south. And in your notes, I'm just going to comment on some of these things. This is the area directly east of the Jordan Rift. It's about 150 miles long. It goes from the base of Mount Hermon to the very southern tip of the Dead Sea. It does have some very mountainous areas in here. Very mountainous areas here. This is where tribes of Reuben and the two half-tribes of Gad and Manasseh, where they're ultimately going to settle. They're going to settle over in this area here. The rest of the children of Israel are going to be in the land of Israel. Reuben and Manasseh and Ephraim are going to be in that area directly east of there. There's a major highway. You can see on the yellow here, there's a major highway called the King's Highway, which goes right through here. Remember I mentioned there's a highway that goes up the Mediterranean, but there's also a highway that goes, the King's Highway, that goes up through here. Okay, let's just start and look at the areas. Okay, I'm going to start off by looking. I'm going to go back to that side. There's an area called the Decapolis. You'll see this in your Bible. What is Decapolis? What does that word mean? Okay, polis, city, deca, 10. 10 regions, 10 cities. During the first century for the Romans, there was an area of 10 regions where Christ ministered to. Matthew 4:25. This is the precursor to what? The Sermon on the Mount, where we're at, right? We're in the Sermon on the Mount. Zach's going to be preaching from Matthew 5:10 through 12 this morning. And right before this, Christ was ministering in Galilee and the Decapolis. It was a major area. So here's the area, Sea of Galilee. Here's the Sea of Galilee, and then you see these major area, and this is where Christ is ministering and serving. So it's one of the areas was west of the Jordan River, but most of the areas were east. And Christ is casting out demons. He's healing people. He's preaching in these areas, which tells us that many of these people would have been what? Not Jews. There have been a lot of Jews in this area, but many of them would have been Gentiles. God intended from the very beginning that the gospel would go to the Gentiles, and so many of these people would have been. Well, let's look at some actually pictures from this area. Okay, so there's the Sea of Galilee. You can see the Sea of Galilee. That's just the very southernmost part of the Sea of Galilee, and this is the area of Gadara. Gadara. Some believe this is where the Gadarene demoniac. There are some other miracles that were in this region. The pigs that run into the sea after Christ cast them out of the demons. Many believe these kind of in these areas. There's a lot of controversy exactly where it is. We don't know exactly, but kind of in this area, roughly, is where it would have been. So we're going to continue on south. See these red dots? I'm going to be right in here. Here's Sea of Galilee, Jordan River. We'll be right in here. This is another area on its east. It's east. You can see here's the map. It's just the area where it is. It's east of the Jordan River. This is commonly called Ramoth Gilead. You see that in your Bible? This is one of the cities of refuge. Remember, there are cities of refuge on both the east and the western side of the Jordan. If you killed someone in self-defense, you didn't mean to, you needed to run to one of these cities of refuge so that you wouldn't be vengeance wouldn't be taken. You were safe if you got to one of these cities of refuge, and this would be an area or one of those areas where it was. This is the Yarmuk Valley. You can see the Sea of Galilee right here. Again, we're kind of working our way south in that. There's Gadara. We're working our way south, continuing that south. This is the area called Gerasa. You can see it's further south. Some people believe this is where the whole demoniac, but it's too far away. It's too far away from the Sea of Galilee for the pigs to run into it. Okay, they would have had to run about 20 miles, and they probably wouldn't have made it. And so there's controversy. But Gerasa, this is the city of Gerasa. You can see these are all Roman ruins, which would have been there during the time of Christ, okay? These would have been there during the first century. Christ, almost certainly, when it says he went to the Decapolis, Gerasa, this place, is one of the capitals of one of the regions, one of those regions of the Decapolis. And so Christ almost certainly would have been in this place. It didn't look like this. It looked like a Roman city because the Romans obviously were in control at this time. Continue on. This is the same place. You can see this is a very common, a central place where they have all these pillars. Very common. When we were there, you see lots of Roman ruins. So this is Christ almost certainly. This is Jerash or Gerasa. It's called modern day Jerash. That's the name of the city. In almost certainly Christ ministered here and preached the gospel here and healed people here. Because when it says he went on this huge region and Galilee will also include the Decapolis. Remember, we just said in Matthew 4:25, he went to this area, the Decapolis. So Christ is walking along these streets. Christ is ministering here. Continuing down south, now we're going to be closer to the Jordan River. This is what's called Gilead. Okay, Gilead. Actually, let me go to the next slide because it'll show you verses, and I'll go back to this one. Gilead is a very well-known, common place in the Scriptures. Gilead is to the east of the Jordan River. Numbers 32, the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad had an exceedingly large number of livestock. So when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that it was a place suitable for livestock. And then Numbers 32, our little ones, our wives, our livestock, and all our cattle shall remain there in the cities of Gilead. Numbers 32:29. Moses said, if the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben, everyone who is armed for battle will cross with you over the Jordan in the presence of the Lord, the land is subdued before you, then you shall give them the land of Gilead for possession. So what happened? They get to the Jordan River. The sons of Reuben, sons of Gad, these tribes, they see this wonderful land of Gilead, and they say, you know what? We just kind of like to stay here. But here's the key issue is they say, but we'll go with you and fight. So it's 1406 BC. This is when this all happened, 1406 BC. So they cross over the Jordan River, their soldiers, and for 6 or 7 years, these two half-tribes, they fight, they help them conquer the land of Israel, and then they come back and they settle on the eastern side. They settle on the eastern side of the Jordan on Gilead. And this is, I mean, you can see you may think of eastern side of Jordan as just a desert. It wasn't. It was a beautiful area. You'll hear the phrase, I think I have a verse later on about, is there a balm in Gilead? Because it was a very lush, it was a very, very a great place to raise crops, a great place for farming, a great place for agriculture, a great place for any kinds of cattle as well. Now, so here's Gilead. Here's Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. Here's Gilead right here. Now, let's going to talk a little bit more about, because we're going to see some of the patriarchs have some things that happened in Gilead. So this is another example of Gilead. The tribe of Gad will settle in the southern part of Gilead. Manasseh is going to settle in the northern part of Gilead. And so they're able to capture this. And so the children of Israel, they come up here from the south. Okay, they come up here from the south, and they're going to cross. They're going to cross the Jordan River probably right about here. The water stopped not probably for 10 miles up to a place called Adam, and then the soldiers from these two half tribes, they go and they cross over and they fight and they help conquer, and then they come back and they ultimately settle on the eastern side. Here's another. This is on Gilead. You would say, wouldn't think about that. These are the grain fields. They said, we want to settle here because it was a great place. Why? Because Gilead, when you think of the Jordan Rift, but you're going to go way up the hills, and Gilead is going to be much higher, and so because of that, they get a lot of rain. I think they get like approximately 30 inches of rain. I think we get like 18 or 20 inches. I don't know exactly, something like that. 18 or 20 inches annual rain is what we get. They can get up to 28 to 30 inches of rain in this area of Gilead. So it was great. It was really good for farming. It was rich in forests. It's often mentioned and connected with Lebanon. Lebanon's going to be up north, but it's going to be connected with the trees there. It was had very thick forests. It was a great place, and that you can see why they wanted to settle there. The balm had antiseptic properties. Jeremiah 8:22, it says, "Is there no balm," or kind of a medicinal use from some of the trees, the sap from the trees that they would make? It came from this area. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has not the health of the daughter of my people been restored? So this area was just known, and this area east of the Jordan River of Gilead was known for its great and trees and things that had great medicinal properties. So it also had some, it wasn't easy to go through. It wasn't flat like the coastlands of Israel or even like the Shephelah. It's going to have some wadis and valleys that are more difficult for you to travel through. We're going to look in a moment, like this is where David flees to. In a little south, David flees to when Absalom takes over the kingdom. This is going to be the area that he's going to flee to because it was a great area to hide out in, very much so. Larry?
I have a question. If when Moses came up with the tribes, they crossed way down by
down here, yeah.
Sea, how did they even know about?
Well, they're starting up in here. Okay, they're up in the southern parts of it. So this is also called Moab, and so yeah, they're down and they're in this area. It's going to be very similar, and so they're going to see it, and then it's going to continue further up north. But you're right. They go through here. Let's see, back. Sorry. But they would have been aware because this whole area up in here is going to be the Transjordan Plateau, which would have been forested. Down south, it's going to get real deserty, really desert. When we hit Edom, when we hit Petra, it's going to get really deserty. But up north here, they would already have been into it just to get to where they're going to cross. They would have already been in the nicer areas with the modern-day Jordan. Modern-day Jordan is kind of south of here, but it's very similar to that. So this is what it would have looked like. Yeah, they're not up here this far. They're not up here this far yet. But even down in here, it's going to be nice. They're going to be aware of that. So they just keep going north. Elijah, he was called Elijah the Tishbite, who was of this. This is 1 Kings 7:1. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead. So maybe you didn't realize it, Elijah was actually from the eastern side of the Jordan River. We don't know, there's a lot of controversy as far as, what tribe he was from. We don't know exactly. Was he from the tribe of Gad? Some people think he's from the tribe of Benjamin. We don't know. Some people think he was a Levite or a priest, but we do know that he grew up to the east of Jordan. He grew up in the area of Gilead. That's why he was called a Tishbite. Here's this is Tishbe, modern day Tishbe, which is probably where Elijah was. You can see the area right in here on this map. Elijah probably grew up in this particular area. We don't know exactly, but most scholars think that's where he was from. This is another indicator of where he was from, Tishbe. This is called probably where he was from. You can see it's kind of in this central area. Now he's going to be, Elijah particularly, is going to be in the ministering to the northern kingdom a lot, and so you can see, he's going to be able to very easily cross over the Jordan and serve there. 2 Samuel. This is a forest in the Gilead Mountains. You may not think of the Transjordan looking like this. Now, what is one of the most significant Bible stories that happened in the forest of Gilead? What is it? Well, Absalom. Absalom. It happens here. It happens in Gilead. 2 Samuel 18:9. Now Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Happened to God's sovereignty, right? For Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak. This is in Gilead. There's lots of oaks there, lots of trees. And his head caught fast in the oak. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth while the mule that was under him kept going. And we read in other places that he had, I forget how many pounds his hair weighed. It was like 9 pounds. It was unbelievable. This guy had a head of hair. Well, that's not a great thing when you're, riding your donkey, your mule, trying to get away from someone, and you go down a low-hanging branch, and then you're hanging there. And it's really a very tragic story, right? It's just, where he gets caught, and then he gets caught in the oak tree, and then Joab comes along. Oh, someone comes along and sees him, comes back and tells Joab, and then Joab gathers all his men around him. He just says, I don't want to talk to you, and they kill him. They kill Absalom, David's son. And David is absolutely heartbroken. The story continues where Joab says, you'd have been glad if we all died, and yet Absalom lived. And you better get out there, or there's going to be another revolt right now. And so, but it happened here. It happened in Gilead, and these oak trees directly east, because this is where David fled to, another place called Mahanaim, where we'll look at in a moment on that. Okay. This is also in Gilead, and there is known for its goats. There's a great verse. I'm sure you ladies appreciate it. And turn your eyes away from me if they have confusing, for your hair is like a flock of goats. I mean, I know you probably all want to have your hair like a flock of goats. Well, it's in Gilead. They're a flock of goats that are descended from Gilead. It's in that same place of Gilead. It's known for, and that's why these two tribes wanted to be there, because it was a great place to raise livestock, a great place for farming as well. So we're continuing on south. Any questions about that? Good question, Larry. Yeah, Caleb.
Where is the border of Israel?
Border? You mean like ancient Israel or modern day Israel?
No, ancient Israel.
Ancient. So the border. Well, remember a long time ago, I had there's several different places where God's going to promise. Abraham, he's going to have land way far away, way all the way to the all way up to the Euphrates River. So that's God's promised that. But as far as, and it changes a lot depending on which king you have, whether you're Saul, David, Solomon, divided kingdom. But we'll just say in general, when they're given the promised land. Okay, so in general, they're given the promised land. It's going to come down here from the river of Egypt, down here on the south side, and then it's going to be up north. The map doesn't show, but it's going to be up north of the Sea of Galilee. Dan's going to be way up there in the north, and obviously it goes to the Mediterranean River. But then it's going to include this area right in here for these two half tribes. It's going to include that. Now, you only had land as much as you could protect, right? And there was constantly people are trying to take your land. I mean, you read that in the books of Second Samuel, First and 2 Kings, First and 2 Chronicles. Constantly, the Philistines or the people from Syria are constantly trying to take land. So it really depended on, could you defend your land? And what enabled them to defend their land? Were they walking with God? Were they walking with God? David, I mean, he had extensive. Solomon's going to extend the border all the way down here to, way down here to Elat, to Aqaba. He has ships that are actually going to go out of there. And so Solomon, it really wasn't Solomon, it was David. David's the one that laid the foundation for that. So Solomon's going to have a lot more land. But then when you get into 722, the Assyrians are going to come from the north. They're going to totally conquer the northern kingdom. And so they lose the whole northern kingdom. Basically, all they have is a very small area here in the south. Under Hezekiah, remember when Brent preached through Isaiah 36 to 39, when the Assyrians come down through, well, they had a very small area. It says that they conquered all the cities in here, and the only one that was left ultimately was Jerusalem. And then in 605, 597, 586, the Babylonians are going to come through, and they're going to take it all. And so they ultimately have no. So it really is, what can you defend? They tear down the walls. Nehemiah rebuilds the walls, 100 years later, but it's really what you could defend. So it's different in all different times of history. Today, modern day, obviously the border here is the Jordan River. That's going to be the eastern border. And then, here we're going to have the Gaza Strip down here, which is the whole major area of conflict right now. Of the down in Gaza, it's just this little. I'm sorry, you can't even see. I've been trying to point things. You can't even see it. Okay, this area right down in here, the Gaza Strip, is going to be right down in here, Yeah, even today Israel says, we'll let you have the Gaza Strip, but they want control even south of the Gaza Strip, so there's a border on the south between Egypt and the Gaza Strip that they are going to control, just to prevent more terrorists from coming in. And the Golan Heights are going to be way up here and up in the north, and Israel's going to go a little bit farther north than that. So, good question. Okay, Jabbok River. You may have heard of the Jabbok River. This is on the eastern. This is the Nahal Jabbok, the Jabbok River. There's a picture of it. Now let's go back to Genesis 32. A really important story with Jacob. It says he arose that same night, Genesis 32. Remember, Jacob he deceived his brother. Esau sold his birthright for a pot of stew, and then then later Jacob, he pretends that he's Esau, and he puts at his mom's counsel, which is amazing dynamics in this family. But he puts on his brother's clothes. He puts goat skin on his neck and on his hands, so that he's able to deceive Isaac, his dad, and so that Isaac thinks he's blessing Esau, and yet he's actually blessing Jacob. But Isaac knew good and well, because God has already told him Jacob's the promised one. So he's trying to short-circuit God's plan. Well, that's not going to happen. And so he blesses Jacob. He gives him everything. I mean, he thinks of every promise he could ever give and gives it to them all, because he thinks it's Esau. But it's not Esau. It's Jacob. And so then what does Esau do? He says, I'm going to kill you. And so Jacob has to flee. He runs back up to, which will later be Assyria, back up to Ur and Haran, the area where they were originally from. He finds a wife, and he ultimately comes back with 12 children and 4 wives and 12 children. But he comes back, and he has all these cattle. I mean, he's a very, 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 very rich man. He's coming back, and he's about to return. His dad's still alive. He's about to return to it's not Israel yet, but he's about to return to what will be what Abraham had been promised as the promised land. But right at the verge of that, he's at the Jabbok River. There's going to be a major confrontation, because remember when he left, there was that, from the sky, there was that stairway that showed, that gave that vision and of angels descending and ascending. And Jacob had said, if I return, I mean, it's a very conditional promise. If I return, you keep me safe and you bless me, then I will follow you. And he does return with amazing, a massive family, all kinds of riches. He returns. And then he comes to this place, to the Jabbok River, and he's very afraid. What's he afraid of? What's Jacob afraid of? Esau. Why? Years before, it's been 20 plus years before, Esau said, I'm going to kill you. And Esau was probably the stronger of the two. I would say a pretty good assumption. Jacob was the more deceptive and the wiser of the two. He usually got the best end of the bargain. But Esau has vowed, I'm going to kill you. And so that's what he's heading into. Well, he's going to have a major interaction with God at this point. And ultimately, it's going to be with Christ. He actually wrestles with the second person of the Trinity, the pre-incarnate Christ, which is amazing what he does here. But that happens here at the Jabbok River. Genesis 32, that's all the background of that. He rose that same night. He took his 2 wives and his 2 maids. That's right, he has 11 kids because Benjamin hasn't been born yet. Benjamin's going to be born, and she's going to die. But he rose that same night, took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children. He crossed the ford at the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream. And he sent them across whatever he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Now the context of that, so that's just going to be east of the Jordan River and the Transjordan highland in this particular area. He's actually wrestling with God, because later on it's going to say you have wrestled with God and not had victory, but you've striven with God, and God's going to bless him as a result of that. It's kind of a sad story because he actually sends them in order. I don't know if you've ever read the story. Order, it's like the most favorite of the last ones, the least favorite of the front ones. Leah goes first with all her kids, and then Rachel goes first with all the kids. And it's like, well, if he's going to kill us, it's just a really, really sad story. But he meets God in this situation. Here's the Nahal or the Jabbok River Valley. Here's another picture of it, what it would have looked like. This is the Jabbok River from the south. And so it was not this barren wasteland. Remember, once again, this is ultimately where his descendants, some of the descendants of 2 of his sons that actually cross, right? 2 of the sons that are going to cross with him there, their descendants, those 2 half-tribes, they're going to settle here. Okay, they're going to settle in this particular area. You can see it's very nice. So here's here's the Jabbok River, Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee. This is where they would have crossed. So Jacob's coming down from the south. The north. Jacob's coming down from the north. Esau's coming up from the south. See this land of Edom? We're going to get there. We're going to get to the land of Edom, Petra, the Nabateans. We're going to get there in a moment. But so Esau's coming from the south. Jacob's coming from the north, and they meet. They're going to meet at the Jabbok River. But before he crosses the Jabbok River, he has this wrestling match with Christ, basically, is what it is. Here's the Jabbok River, the eastern end, very close to where Jacob would have wrestled with the angel. Here's another picture of the Jabbok River. They actually have some places and shrines where they think it happened. We don't know where it happened, but it was somewhere along the Jabbok River. Here's another picture of it. Now this is a modern day. They've made some reservoirs so that they can retain the water, so it's more usable for irrigation. But look at that. Is that what you would normally think of when you would think of the area of the east of Jordan? East of Jordan River? Probably not. And you can see. I can see why these tribes wanted to settle there. It was a beautiful area. It was very. They could obviously raise families and have cattle and ranches and different things there. Here's another picture of near to the place, somewhere along here, we don't know where, Penuel, and this is the same verse. Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God. Anytime you see a word with an El on the end of it, it has something to do with God. El. Michael, I've told you, Michael, Joel, it has to do with, and so when you see Peniel, it means I've seen God, and face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. Why? Because Christ strikes him on his leg, so he limps the rest of his life as a very vivid reminder that he needs to be following God. He needs to submit to God. But it happened somewhere along this area. It wasn't in the middle of the desert, in a sense. It was in an area very much like this, which later his descendants, at least of 2 of his sons, their tribes that come out of those 2 sons will settle in this particular area. Any questions on that before we continue down? One of the reasons I like to show you these things is because it brings reality. This really happened. This is the playing board. This is where it really happened, or somewhere around this area. It's not just kind of a figment. It's not just a dream somewhere. No, this really happened in a real area by a real river. Jacob really wrestled with Christ, and he was really struck. And many believe this is either where he truly came to God, or we see there's some change. There's definitely some change from this point on in Jacob's life. Okay? Yeah. Go ahead.
What is the difference between the name Leah?
Yeah, it's just Hebrew. I don't know. We don't know that it's a very similar name, same name. There's no. Yeah, it's obviously it has the same roots in there, to see, and then God, that he has seen God face to face. That's the idea. It has that. The word means to see God face to face. Well, even more than that, he didn't just see God. He wrestled physically, this is called a Christophany. This isn't an incarnation. This is a Christophany. Christophany means a place where Christ takes on human form, and this is one of those. This is pre-incarnation. There's several places where Christ takes on human form. Genesis 18. Remember when the three angels appeared to Abraham? Two of them were angels. They go down and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. The third, or the first one, was Christ. It's a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, because the person, that being that's talked very clearly is God. It had that conversation with Abraham about, well, if there's 50, 45, that whole conversation is with God. Well, it's with the first being. And so this is another example of a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ before he actually becomes a man. He's not a man here. He just takes on a human form, so that in some way that he could literally, physically wrestle with God. Which tells you a little bit about this guy, that he would actually, okay, I'm going to take you on, God. God needed to do some work with his heart. There's some pride in God for all of us, right? God will do whatever he needs to do in our lives to break us, doesn't he? He loves us. He's gonna do whatever he needs to do in our life to bring us to a point where we're going to be dependent on him. I love these stories too, because I don't remember who I was talking to this week about that the Bible is real, and it tells the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, the patriarchs, the great followers of God in the Bible, there's very few of them, just a few, but most of them, we see all their sins, everything, it's all out there, and yet God still uses them, right? It gives you hope. God can use a guy like Jacob, right? God can just use us. Now, question is, are we going to do this the easy way or the hard way, right? Jacob tended to do it the hard way, kind of every time. But God's still gracious. God uses him as the ancestor of all of the descendants of Jacob are Jews, okay? Not before him, right? Esau's descendants aren't Jews. All the descendants of Jacob are Jews. And they're his chosen people. It's amazing. God uses people with struggles and hang-ups and difficulties and sins if they will follow him, if they will come to him. I mean, I was talking to someone this week about a really difficult situation, really very painful situation. I said, you know what? These are the kind of situations that Christ died for. Christ didn't just, die for, well, if you kind of have a little bit of a financial difficulty or your car's not running real great. No, Christ died for catastrophic, impossible situations. That's what Christ died for. So that then we would say, God, you are so good. You have used me, or in spite of struggles and sins and mistake. I mean, Jacob is a wonderful, wonderful example of that. I love these stories. But happened in a real place, happened in a real time. It's not just a story. It really happened, right? It really happened. Okay, let's continue on. Yeah, go ahead.
Why would Jacob's interaction with God be so much different than Moses' interaction with God? Would it be just because Jacob chose to do things the hard way, or?
Why was Jacob's interaction with God so much different than God's? How would you say it's different?
With
Moses.
Yeah, so Moses had to have his back turned to him, right?
Yeah.
And then afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
I guess those are the big things I'm thinking about, where Jacob was physically involved with God.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, why is there such a... Well, part of it is because God deals differently with different people. He doesn't have a cookie cutter, and Jacob had I'll say issues, but he had sins that he struggled with, and so God's not going to let him go. I mean, Esau had issues, obviously, sin. But Jacob seems like the bigger problem. I mean, the guy is so deceptive, and you look at the details of his life, and yet God in his grace chooses to use Jacob. Moses, Moses is a wonderful example of he was very humble. It says he was the humblest man who ever lived. That's what the text says about Moses. I think it's one of the big things you see the difference in Jacob. Big difference. It tells you what James 4 says, God is opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble. I think that's a major reason. There's a humility in the part of Moses that God worked differently with him. So why was Moses able to see God even face to face? It says he went into the tabernacle, and it says that his face would glow. In a sense, he had to put a veil over his face, so they wouldn't, because it would lessen. And people say, "What's going on?" It's lessening. So that's why he had the veil over his face. It also says that Joshua would go in after and say, "I'm going to get some of that too." Joshua would go in, which he becomes the next leader of the children of Israel. But I really think it's the humility issue. Moses is sad. Sorry, the next story we're going to look at. Well, let's go there. Let's go to the next story because it relates. Good transition, Trey, because the next story and the next location talks about Moses. This is a very sad, very, very, very sad. And yet God is gracious even in this. Now, Deuteronomy 34:1. Now Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo. Okay, where's Mount Nebo? Okay, here's Mount Nebo. Once again, you can see on the map right here, in this area right here, Mount Nebo is somewhere in here in this area. So this is, we don't know exactly, but this is probably Mount Nebo. There's there's a number of hills on it. But Deuteronomy 34. Book of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomos, second law. Book of Deuteronomy is the second law, right? Because God had given the first law in Exodus, Leviticus, and then part of Numbers. He'd given them the first law, but then what happens? In Numbers chapter 13, they come to Kadesh Barnea, right? And they've just seen 10 incredible plagues, basically wiped out the most powerful nation on the earth, Egypt, right? They've been delivered from Egypt. God purposely backs them up against the Red Sea. Purposely backs them up against the Red Sea and then parts the Red Sea and kills all of Pharaoh and his armies. I mean, this is what they've just gone through. They've been at Sinai for about a year. I mean, just incredible. They look at Sinai, they see the smoke, and then God gives the law. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And then, okay, now we're ready. We're a nation now, right? Because they have a constitution. They're gathered together. And they come up in Numbers chapter 13. They come to where they're about to enter into the land. And what happens? They send 12 spies. 10 say no, 2 say go. Joshua and Caleb, the other ones say, they fall on their face and say, "What are you doing? What have we seen? We can't lose." But they say what? They're giants in the land. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. We'll all be destroyed. We'll all be killed. And everyone just rebels and says, "No, we're not going in." And so God, I mean, it's a very interesting story. God says, "Okay, I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to start over with you, Moses." And I would assume that would also mean Joshua and Caleb because they were righteous. And Moses, it says, intercedes for, God uses Moses' intercession so that he says, "Okay, but this generation is not going into the promised land." And so they make a U-turn. Well, actually, they try to go in and a bunch of them get killed. But they make a U-turn and God says, "You're going to wander around in the wilderness for 40 years. What's the purpose of the wilderness wandering? Well, 40 days, the spies were 40 days in the spying, and he says for every day there's going to be a year. But ultimately, what's the reason for the 40 years? What's going to happen during that 40 years? Kill them all, right? They're all going to die. Probably 2 million people. 2 million people are going to be died out. Anyone that was 21 or older. I mean, if you were 20, hopefully whatever your birthday was. But if you were 20 and younger, you were good. But if you're 21 or older, you're going to die. And that would mean that most of the people died before you should have, right? Because people are living well past that. And so for anyone 21 or older was killed off. One time it's like 1,500 funerals a day for 40 years. That's what it was, to kill off 2 million people. So you would have, every single day, you'd have been reminded what? We didn't believe God. We didn't believe God. We didn't believe God. We didn't believe God. So the constant reminder of that. So 40 years go by. They go all the way back. And then, so Kadesh Barnea is up in the south, but God, I think I mentioned to you before, they wander around the wilderness, even down south here. They come back up on the eastern side, and so that's where we are in, we're in the eastern side. They're about to go into the promised land. But something happened that is a precursor to this Deuteronomy 34 story. It's well into the mission. They're about 38, 39 years into it, and they need water again. And the people are, what did the people do the best at? Grumbling, complaining. They were like whiners on steroids. They were complaining and grumbling. You brought us out of the wilderness to kill us, and they're angry at Moses. They're angry at Moses. And I mean, can you imagine? I mean, if you think sometimes in your home you have, a little bit of whining going on, you have 2 million people that he has to put up with for 40 years. They didn't graduate and leave the home. No, for 40 years they're whining and complaining constantly. And Moses has just had it. This is it. And so God tells him, he says, okay, they've done it before, down at Meribah. He was supposed to strike, not Meribah, but another place they were supposed to strike the rock. But this time God says what? He says, I want you to speak to the rock. I want you to speak to the rock. Well, Moses is just furious. And he and Aaron, it specifically says Aaron, he and Aaron go together, and there's a rock, and we don't know, some people say they know where the rock is, but we don't really know. And he is so angry, he yells at them. He says, he just yells at them, and he strikes the rock. Now what happens? Water comes out. Water comes out. Great. We're all good. Everything's great. The water came out. We get water. Well, the people got water, but what happens? Not just Moses, but also Aaron. And God says, he says, you did not treat me as holy before the eyes of the people. Therefore, you're not going in the promised land. And neither did who? Aaron. Aaron did not get to go into the promised land because of the golden calf. I would think that would be pretty significant, right? You help the people make a golden calf? No, it was the issue here where they struck, he and Moses together struck the rock. Why? Because they did not treat God as holy. And it just shows how serious God takes his holiness. Because Moses was taking it on him. He just called them a bunch of rebels. He takes it on himself. And God says, no, I'm the leader of this people, and so you're not going into the land. But he allows them to see the land. There's a grace in this. There's some grace. There's true grace in this. Don't be upset of God, because this shows how holy God is. God says, no, you got to treat me as holy. You need to finish well. You need to finish well. And so he's going to die, but Deuteronomy 34, he goes up. Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. Okay, remember, we're right opposite Jericho. We're about to cross into Jericho, across the Jordan to Jericho, and the Lord Yahweh showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan. Okay. This is all Gilead in here. Dan, I can't even, my cursor doesn't even go far enough up here on the north. It's so far north. Could Moses have seen that far? Not with physical eyes, not with any eyes that we have. God even gives him more. He gives him almost truly a supernatural that he got to see. He got to see all the land. God was gracious to him. He got to see the land. And so this is what happens here on probably this area or right around this area. He takes him up to this area to Mount Nebo, and then God takes his life. And we'll see later on in the book of Jude that they argue over his body, Satan, but God just buries him. They don't know where he is. There's no special burial place for him, but that's where he is on Mount Nebo there. There's another, just looking at this area. This is probably more what you'd think about when you think about that area. So there was definitely a desert area. Menahem, okay? So that's the story of Moses, Mount Nebo. Now we're going to continue on south a little bit more. We're going to look at an area called Menahem. Say, what is that? It's probably not an area that you're real familiar with. Yeah, go ahead. Gus.
What you're talking about with Moses is years later, after God has done working.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Exodus chapter 4, when he is called Moses, Moses doesn't want to go. Clearly, that disobedient, he hasn't been circumcised. And obviously, the Lord wants to address that with him, because Exodus 4:24, at the lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought
Mhm.
So, for us, life saved his life by circumcising.
Yeah.
Obviously, God also was going to be violent with Moses as well.
Yeah, God held him to a high degree of holiness because, kind of backtracking the story, beginning of the book of Exodus, his parents keep him from getting killed. They don't kill him because that's what they were supposed to do. The Pharaoh's daughter takes him into their home in God's sovereignty, but then he thinks he's going to take it into his own hands. He kills an Egyptian for trying to injure an Israelite, but then he has to flee. And then the prior chapter of the story you talked about is Exodus chapter 3, which is that's where we see he has the burning bush experience, where God appears to him and says, you are on holy ground, take off your sandals, and so he does. And so I think deep inside Moses, there is a humbleness, there is a humility before God that we see lacking with Jacob. But then you're right, he wasn't following the law of Moses, or law of that God had given to them regarding circumcision. And so God, it says God sovereignly works, but it says he tried to kill him. Now, God could kill him if he wanted to kill him, right? And yet he sustains him, and he ultimately is called to be the greatest leader of all time, leading 2 million people out of Egypt into the promised land. And he does. He leads them into the promised land, all the way to the very verge, and then Joshua will be the next leader. Yeah.
I always
Sharon.
thought that was God's grace, that he allows him to be done with those people. He led them for 40 years.
That's true.
He saw the land. And
I'm done with you people.
God. Yeah.
That's true.
That worked for a long time.
No, I do agree with you, Sharon, that you're talking about Mount Nebo. That was a God grace. You know what? You've just served me enough. I'm taking you home. These people are just going to still be a piece of work. And so I'm going to give it to Josh. Yeah, that's true. It was, but we also have to realize that for a Jewish person, the land was a major issue. I mean, all the way from Abraham, Genesis chapter 12, the land. Yeah, the people was an idea of grace, but he didn't get to go into the land, which is
Got to see it.
he got to see it. And so God is being gracious. And he got a supernatural vision of it, because you and I, if you were standing on Mount Nebo, you couldn't even come close to seeing all the way up to Dan. God allowed him, he gave him a panoramic vision somehow that he got to see all the land. It was the biggest big screen you've ever seen. He saw it, and God was gracious to him. Yeah. Good. Well, let's continue on. About 500 years later, we get to David. We go through the time of Judges, about 300 years, and then Saul, and then we get into the time of David. So we're roughly about 1000 AD. I'm sorry, 1000 BC. Roughly about 1000 BC. And Menahem, it was a border city between Gad and the eastern half of Manasseh. 2 Samuel 17:24. Then David came to Menahem, and Absalom crossed the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. And so Jerusalem's right here. David flees, goes over to Menahem, and he stays. He brings his parents. He brings a bunch of people in this area to run away from his son. It's one of the saddest stories, in the Bible, where here David, the king, the man after God's own heart, his own son is trying to kill him. He's trying to be the king, and so Absalom chases after him and goes to Menahem, which is this area right in here, very close to the area of where the two tribes had settled. Now Absalom gets killed by Joab, and then David is able to go back into the land of Israel. He becomes the king again. Even Rehoboam actually will build his capital. Rehoboam, he will strengthen this area. He had a Transjordan center in this area. He was the king of the southern kingdom when it splits at this point. Okay. Continue on, Jordan River. This is, you can see the Dead Sea right here. Here's the Jordan River. Here's the plains of Moab. This is, I mentioned before, this is where the children of Israel would have been right prior to when they're crossing over the Jordan River. Mount Nebo, you can see, that's a pretty good location. You can see all the way over here. Amman, Jordan, modern day Amman, Jordan. King Hussein is right there. Would be in the Transjordan plateau. This is another picture of the Dead Sea. It's like we're in Qumran. It's like this picture is taken from right here, looking east, and here this is looking into the plains of Moab. This is the Arnon Valley. River Valley. This is the fields of Moab. Remember I said this would be a great place to settle. This would be related to your question, Larry. This is where they would have gone through this area right here directly. I mean, this is right in here in this area, right in here. So they would have gone through this, and it's going to be very good to the north as well. I'll close with this final story. What else is Moab significant? Who else was from Moab? Lot's family, okay. Good. There's also a lady from Moab named Ruth, okay? Ruth. Came about in the days when the judges governed. There was a famine in the land, a certain man of Bethlehem. So Bethlehem's going to be right over here, very close to Jerusalem. A certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab. Here we go, with his wife and his 2 sons. And so Moab is the area where Ruth lived. They came over here because it was you remember, what time period does the book of Ruth occur within in the Bible, historically? What? Yeah, someone said it. Judges, during time of Judges. Yeah, exactly. Time of Judges. So 1406, they come into the land, they conquer the land BC, and then for 300 years, the Judges until about 1100 BC, and during that 300 was a horrible time period. If you read the book of Judges, horrible things are happening. You know, concubines are being cut up. I mean, it's just horrible. All the sin. It's cycles of sin. 7 cycles of sin, and then judgment, and then God delivers them. Well, the context of the book of Ruth is Judges, and so the book of Ruth happens during the time of Judges. It's kind of like if you went to a jeweler and they want to show you a nice diamond, they put it against on some black velvet that the diamond really jumps out. That's what the book of Judges happens. The book of Ruth happens. It happens in the context of the book of Ruth. And so this is where it is this woman comes, she's a Moabitess. If you look, she's one of those 4 women that are mentioned in the genealogy of Christ, and she wasn't an Israelite, and yet she becomes an Israelite, right? She becomes an Israelite very clearly. She says, I'm going to follow your God. And Naomi, and she follows her God, and she becomes what? How is she related to David? What? Yeah, great-grandmother. She's David's great-grandma. But she came from Moab. And it just shows God's sovereignty in working through this, that he's going to work and he's going to draw her to himself, but he's also going to use her to provide one of the sweetest stories. Very much a picture, the key word in that is Gaal, kinsman redeemer. She has a kinsman redeemer in Boaz, which is very much illustrative. It's not a type, but it's an illustrative of we see what Christ has done for us. So amazing. So she came from Moab. Well, I'm going to tie it up there, and we're going to continue on. Next time, we're going to go down through, continue on south. We're going to continue on south in this area. I'm going to show little pictures. We're going to next time we'll look at Edom, and we're going to talk about the Edomites. We're going to talk about the Nabateans. We're going to talk about Petra. We're going to show you some pictures of Petra, and which is a very, very significant area. There's a whole book, a minor prophet that wrote about this. Who is that? One of the shortest in your Bible, the book of Obadiah, which talks about those who were in high places, and they thought they were so safe that God could never touch them, or no one could ever touch them, but they're going to be brought to destruction. But it's going to be coming in this particular area. Okay? Well, let me close our time in prayer, and if you have any questions coming up afterwards. Father, thank you so much that even as we talk about these stories, they're real. These really happened. And as we see how and where they happened, it helps it to be more vivid to us. Even as we see examples of Jacob, we see examples of Ruth, we see examples of David. And God, may we be those that follow you with whole hearts, of Moses, that are humble before you, and that you would use us for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, if you have kids, go on, run up and get your kids.